Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, you are listening to a Radiligin Broadcasting premiere podcast. Damn you, Hollywood! And here's your host, Robert Winfrey. Yay!
Yeah, I know you want to be animated with your hands. You might be overdoing it just a touch. I don't think every word doesn't need the jazz hands.
I like to add accents.
For only a small percentage of our total audience that watches the video.
For those of you tuning in on YouTube, what a show you just got.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. To all of you listening out there, I'm Robert Winfrey. That, because I can remember my reversed right from left, is Mark Radulich. And tonight we are talking on Damn You Hollywood about the Amazon Prime Chris Pratt vehicle, The Tomorrow War. I'm going to apologize in advance if I sound funny, if I am a little bit surly. I just had dental work done a couple of hours ago. The Novocaine is mostly worn off, so I shouldn't be slurring my speech like a drunkard. I've never actually been drunk, so I don't know what I would sound like drunk. But the pain is starting to set in, so if I get surly, I blame my dentist.
It didn't start off its life as an Amazon Prime exclusive.
No, it did not.
They were trying to get this thing in the theaters, and with COVID-19 being what it was, a lot of studios that didn't have a ready outlet, such as Paramount at the time, to distribute their movies on streaming, sought other options. Selling things to Netflix was a popular thing. Selling things to Amazon was a popular thing. That's what happened with Coming to America, Without Remorse. Now this one, a bunch of Sony stuff, especially the animated, got sold to Netflix. So this has become a pattern. And I haven't read too much about this yet, but I have a sneaking suspicion that Paramount tested this with small audiences here and there. It probably did not test well, and they were like, yeah, this is at the time they made the decision, and I had heard that they were Amazon was seeking to buy the Tomorrow War like way back in like January-ish, and no one knew what the summer was going to look like at the time. So I think Paramount was like, theaters may not be all the way open, people may not be brave enough to return to theaters, and this may not be good enough to get people to come to theaters with Black Widow and F9 out there and some other Disney picks. So they were like, let's just take the money and run. And since Amazon was throwing stupid money at things, I guess they figured, you know what? It's easy money. Let's just do it. And and we won't take the risk of getting burned at the box office. And so the Tomorrow War, even though it was a fairly big budget, summer release, landed on Amazon Prime.
Yeah, that all sounds about right. That would dovetail into one of the points I want to talk about this movie, but I want to get through the plot first, so just remind me to come back to that.
Sure.
We both kind of agreed to put this on the schedule. I think you and I both not had very different expectations from each other, but we both expected something different from the movie. I know I did.
When it was going to theaters, I wasn't planning on reviewing it. It wasn't based on previous IP. It was up against other competition at the time. So I was like had it kept this date but had gone to theaters, it would have been competing with The Purge, and at one point, I think Top Gun. So I was like, well, this is like way down on my list of priorities of things to review. When it went to Amazon, and it was actually Pat, who unfortunately couldn't be with us tonight because he had work obligations and whatnot that prevented him from watching the movie in a timely fashion. But Pat was interested in this, and I think you were quasi-interested. So we're like, okay, well, streaming stuff's a lot easier to cram into the schedule.
I'm willing to give... Chris Pratt has a fair amount of goodwill. I'm willing to kind of take a flyer on that. And this turned out very, very different from what I expected.
Yeah.
I expected a lot more comedy.
See, I didn't. When the premise is Chris Pratt is recruited to fight a war in the future, I'm thinking something along not in terms of plot or anything like that or themes, but more in aesthetic. I'm thinking something along like Tron or Blade Runner. Like it's 2021 and you're pulling a guy 30 years into the future to fight a war. I'm thinking something like, again, along with maybe the same lines of like Terminator, that sort of thing. And aesthetically, that's not what this looks like at all. And as a matter of fact, if you didn't say it was 30 years in the future, if it was 2050, you wouldn't know it based on the kind of future that they show you in the movie. They basically, it's 30 years in the future in name only.
Yeah, they do. They do nothing with the setting as far as that goes.
No, and that's the thing. It's like I want you to do your plot synopsis, but like the set pieces are a building with a lab in it, some streets, and then some more streets, if I remember correctly. Oh, the military base, and then he's out of the future again. I'm watching this thing, and I'm like, wow, why bother? Like we'll talk about this. But if your whole concept is a man from the present has to go into the future to say, to save the present, because humanity is going extinct. Okay, then you got to do something fun with the setting, and they don't do anything with it. And I'm like, why even bother then? Why bother? Yeah. Why bother setting it? Like, why couldn't the aliens have just? I mean, I know why, because of the things that happen in the plot. But I think if you just want to tell like a crazy alien story, they could have done the same thing, but the aliens had been around since the 90s instead of, or whatever, whatever the time the timeline is, they defrost now instead of 30 years from now. But I'll let you do your thing.
No, I largely agree with that. It's kind of a wasted opportunity, and this movie the script needed several more like trips through the editing process. That's my big gripe about this movie, I think.
Yeah, I would, so not that I want to get into a tangential conversation about this, but I watched this and, my kids both largely enjoyed it, but they're 7 and 10. It's kind of, and then I like coworkers and people that follow me on Facebook that are just friendly, that they're not film people, but they were all like, yeah, they largely enjoyed it, and there's a lot to enjoy about this thing. It's very broad, easy to swallow entertainment. I think the problem for me became, there were certain things said and done in the film that did not survive any kind of scrutiny once I thought about it.
Oh yeah, a lot.
It's so funny because my kids have now watched enough movies with me that they were like, huh, didn't we see these aliens already in Independence Day? And like, and there was a couple of other like, haven't we done this before? And I'm like, hang on, let me show you aliens.
Yeah, finally.
And and there was that was a mixed reception. My son preferred the Tomorrow War to Aliens, but then the Tomorrow War moves a lot quicker and is more easier to understand than Aliens was. My daughter had the reverse reaction, but hey, let me give you a shock here. Her favorite character.
Your daughter liked Ellen Ripley
and Vasquez.
The occasionally mistaken for a man.
Yes, it's a great line. Have you ever been mistaken for a man? No. Have you?
It is. Look, Vasquez isn't a character though. She's a set piece. Ripley's a character, and an exceptional one for the record.
Yes, sir. All right, you want to get into this?
Yeah, let's try to do this. So the Tomorrow War starts with the World Cup, which takes place apparently over Christmas, and is simply a vehicle for people from the future who have gone back in time. We actually drop into this in media res with Chris Pratt falling out of the sky from much too high up, along with a bunch of other people. And because he has plot armor, he falls into a pool and not onto the sidewalk.
I don't want to keep interrupting you because I've now listened to enough of our old podcasts and done enough present ones with other people to where like I want you to just get through it and I don't want you to have to constantly stop. But I do have to say my understanding of the time travel was that he was protected from falling to his death by virtue of whatever energy was around him transporting him through time.
Yeah, that's not true. Plenty of the other people that fell out of that hole with him died.
They just hit the floor and died?
Especially if they like fell not to the roof of the building, but all the way to the street.
Really? That's stupid.
It was, again, it's explained as there being a malfunction in there. They were supposed
Okay.
to drop like 6 inches off the ground, like
Not
a short drop of, a couple of feet.
not 100 feet up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Never
So,
mind then. I guess
no,
it was a detail that escaped me. Please continue.
that's fine. This movie's not large on detail. um, anyway, so we drop into that. We get the flashback. We meet Chris Pratt. He's a high school biology teacher. He's a former, some form of. This is really odd and was written by someone with just like no understanding of the military. He was some kind of command officer for, I believe it was the Army.
He was a Green Beret.
Uh,
Chris Pratt, he was a Green Beret. It says so in the wiki.
Okay, he was a Green Beret or he was a Ranger, one of the two. The supreme irony of Rangers. Never mind. I don't want to get into military beefs. There's too many of them. They're watching the World Cup over Christmas. Chris Pratt is denied a job at some kind of research laboratory that he wants to be a part of. He doesn't just want to teach high school biology for the rest of his life. He believes he is destined. He believes there's something else he can do with his existence. And trying to teach disinterested teenagers the ins and outs of biology, one can understand his desperation at trying to secure some other form of employment.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine, Mark, you sympathize a great deal as someone who.
I mean, yeah, but I also accepted it as a trope of a character. They're always beginning at sort of like they're in a place of it can only go up from here, and then it goes for a little bit, and then it goes way, way, way down again, and then and there's your hero's arc.
Yeah. Anyway, in the middle of the World Cup, some people from the future come in via wormhole and announce to everyone that they're from 30 years in the future when humanity is fighting for its very survival against aliens and they're losing badly. Now we have developed a somewhat stable wormhole. We've gone back in time about this 30-year period. We're going to get people from the past to help bolster our ranks in the future, and we're going to fight and save. And part of their big thing is, technically we're all like everyone's still alive. We're your children and or grandchildren. It hasn't been that long. So please help us not be violently murdered by feral aliens. That'd be nice. And there's a worldwide draft. We get hints at social upheaval because this movie touches on a lot of things without ever exploring them. Eventually, Chris Pratt is drafted. He thinks about trying to avoid it, but that would require him getting in touch with his father, the great J.K. Simmons. And they get in touch briefly, and he can't get over his hatred of the man. J.K. Simmons, who, the way his character describes it, he came back from Vietnam and was entirely too traumatized to have been a husband and father, and so he abandoned his wife and son. And his partial justification for this is the undoubtedly true sentiment that it would have been worse for you if I'd actually stayed.
Yeah.
But suffice it to say, he could have certainly handled that better. Chris Pratt can't get over his daddy issues. He leaves. He goes through with some degree of basic training, is dropped into the future with a couple of colorful characters, 2 of whom die. They arrive. They're supposed to rescue biological material and hopefully researchers from a station, from some kind of laboratory. I don't know why I'm saying it like that. I normally say laboratory, but I'm weird. We get an action set piece. Sorry, I forgot to mention. Part of the driving impetus here for Chris Pratt is he's a husband and father himself. He has a wife and a daughter. And they play into this in a bit because as Chris Pratt and just a couple of his fellows are the only ones who survive, they have to escape Miami as there's not only a bunch of these alien creatures, they then wind up carpet bombing the entire city to try and wipe them out. But the important characters survive and are evacuated to I think it was the Dominican Republic. where Chris Pratt meets one of the commanding officers, a colonel that is actually his daughter. And they are trying to conduct research because, well, humanity has lost too much manpower to be able to really fight these things off. Our best hope now is biological warfare. So his daughter is trying to work on some kind of toxin. They've got a variation of this that works fine on the males, but these creatures are a bit more like ants in their evolutionary path. Few females, tons of males, and they breed like ants. So they've been able to kind of corner a female. They capture it. They bring it back. They run a bazillion tests. They eventually find a compound that works. Right about then, though, you see all of these males are just... I could be really disingenuous here, but I'm not going to. They're all looking for the female, for this particular female, because there are so few of them.
So it's like Porky's with aliens.
Sure.
A whole bunch of males descending on one poor female.
Something like that, yeah. They show up. There's again another big action set piece. The actual plan at this particular point that we are at, that is revealed by what's her name? Miri, I think.
Mary, I thought her name was.
No. It's spelled with like a U and an I. I'm going with Miri.
Yeah, it's spelled Muri, so let's go with Muri.
Okay, we'll go with Miri. I can't remember the exact pronunciation. Anyway, her plan is to send Chris Pratt back with this toxin and like, here, they showed up in this location on this date. We can't win. You guys can. Good luck. Chris Pratt doesn't want to leave his daughter to die, somewhat understandably, but ultimately is unable to stop this from happening. The creatures swarm this last particular bastion of humanity. You should skip those ads. The aliens swarm the last bastions of humanity. He goes into the past, but now because we've lost contact with the future, everyone thinks, you know what, who cares? Let's turn this place into a nihilistic nightmare of gratifying our basest urges. But a couple are, plucky group of underdogs is able to harness the knowledge of an obsessive teenager rather than consulting anything approximating a legitimate volcanologist. I can't tell you how much I hated that. I really can't tell you how much I hated that point.
If there's a film craft thing that made it acceptable to me, but in terms of any sense of realism, I was like, I wanted to throw my shoe at the television.
There's actually a line where one of the other characters says, "Boy, I would have killed for a moment like this in high school." And writer, you could not have inserted yourself into that scene any harder.
Yeah.
You sad sack of crap.
Like I said, Chekhov's gun on the one hand, on the other hand, so stupid it should be studied.
I can appreciate the Chekhov's gun bit, but really, look, if your only justification for firing Chekhov's gun is that Chekhov's gun was on the mantelpiece, maybe it doesn't need to be there. I have a huge issue with the writing of this movie, but we'll get to it. Anyway, they need a pilot because they have to go to Russia. So they recruit J.K. Simmons, who's a pilot and has disdain for all forms of organization, so has no problem thumbing his nose at the governments of every country between wherever they were in California and outer Siberia. They find where these creatures are, somewhat improbably. They are frozen in a glacier on an island in Russia. Turns out they crash landed there who knows how long ago in the past. Actually, you could figure out very specifically how long ago they crashed there. If you understand how the polar ice caps actually formed, they haven't always been there, depending on how far back along we are in the tectonic motion of the continents. But, I only slightly know what I'm talking about. Whoever wrote this knew nothing. They find this alien spaceship, which is not piloted by these creatures. They're entirely too feral to have actually organized a society to understand space travel, but rather a different alien species that was transporting them for unknown purposes. Could have been something as simple as the relocation of livestock, could have been as nefarious as this is a biological weapon that we drop onto planets we wish to make war on. Who knows?
Whatever reason Han Solo was transporting the octopus monster from The Force Awakens, it works for me.
Indeed. So they go to inject this toxin into this huge colony. It doesn't actually work all that well, but eventually one of the females escapes. A few of the others stay behind to blow up the ship with enough C4 to. They had the same amount of C4 that guy from Without Remorse had strapped to himself. This was a slightly more realistic example of what that amount of C4 would do in terms of collateral damage. So they kill all of them except for one, which Chris Pratt and J.K. Simmons wind up squaring off with in a handicap match. They eventually win. There is no heroic sacrifice. Chris Pratt makes a degree of peace with his father, gets to introduce him to his granddaughter, and the present/future is saved. Not literally saved because time keeps flowing in one direction, so everything that you actually do in the past doesn't impact the present. I somewhat appreciate that. Look, time travel is a giant bundle of what ifs and scientific theories. The only thing I ask from your fictional story about time travel is that you're internally consistent. That's really all I ask for. I think it's the only fair thing you can do.
I think,
and this at least was.
So the good, the bad, and the ugly, just to kind of keep this structured and brief. The good, everything that is set up in Act 1 is paid off by Act 3. I mean, in terms of elementary, solid screenwriting, what more can you ask for? Nobody gives a poor performance. Everybody, there are no super annoying like characters, like the blogger in Godzilla
No.
Kong, or Anthony, what's his face from Transformers.
I slightly disagree with you. The character of Charlie really could have died.
Which one was Charlie?
Oh, the happy black.
Oh, the one that's in Werewolves Within. I liked him. I liked him for the same reason I liked him in Werewolves Within. He just comes across as average nice guy. Maybe a little too Ned Flandersy in either role, but like I would prefer that to I'm a stupid idiot making stupid jokes. Like
100% agree with you on that.
Like, his situation was I'm a scientist, not a soldier. I shouldn't be here. But at least he was able to kind of tap that down and say, well, I'm here, though, and I don't want to die, so I should take this seriously. And then when he was given there's times where they use him as sort of comic relief, but it's not so over the top and, pardon me for saying minstrelly, that it didn't really bother me at all. I think he has a lot of charm.
It's certainly not as overbearing as that same role has been done in other.
Yeah, again, he's not the blogger from Godzilla vs. Kong, and he's not Anthony what's-his-face from Transformers, as I said before.
Look, he's not anyone from Transformers.
Yeah, true.
Because they all should have died.
And to that extent, nobody else in the cast is either.
Yeah.
Betty Gilpin isn't nobody is like a horribly written caricature. Betty Gilpin is great in the role that she's given as wife. The kid's fine. Chris Pratt has charm for days. We all know that from his previous movies. Even if he's in a bad movie, he's always charming and, acts well.
Yeah.
No matter how stupid the vehicle is. The other African-American guy, the angry soldier, he was fine. The gal playing the daughter, Yvonne Strakovsky, she has a lot of good on-stream chemistry for what's being portrayed as father and daughter.
She and Chris Pratt had their interplay was great.
Yeah. To that extent, the other thing I like about this movie is that, yes, it's an aliens attack movie, and it's science fiction and all of that. And I wouldn't even call it science fiction. That's the category they're throwing this into. But there's not a tremendous amount of science here.
There's fictional science, but this is an action movie first and foremost.
Right. That's what I was getting at. So what I like about it is it's really the story about this father coming to terms with his own father, but also unbeknownst to him, repeating the patterns of his father and having to resolve all of that. And so I like the journey that Chris Pratt goes on, because his daughter tells him, hey, you're going to leave. You've never been happy with your life. You're going to leave us in a few years, and then you're going to die, and you're going to leave me brokenhearted, resentful, and angry. And and so this whole movie is a vehicle for him to fix all of that and be a better person. And along the way, see his own father's failings, but from a different angle to where he can accept them. And he welcomes the father back into the grandfather, J.K. Simmons, back into their family. And it's all resolved in a nice little bow. And I like that. I like that it was just, any movie that has heart and soul, in and around a big monster mash, I'm going to enjoy. So those are the things I liked about this.
I think what kills me about this movie is, I think with another couple of trips through the editing process, this could have been great.
So I want to speak about that because there's one thing about this movie that I think the movie lost me at about the point where they're trying to create dramatic conflict and tension by creating a ticking clock. He's got to go back. They've got to get this serum. Humanity dies within a few days of Chris Pratt going back to the present. And so she's got to get this serum completed and send it back with him before the thing on his arm will auto set to return him to the present on X day. Humanity dies in Y, and Y is very close to X. So that's fine. That all that ticking clock stuff is fine. That creates adequate enough tension for the heroes to do stuff. So I can get this out and we can discuss it. Here is my major problem with this. At the point at which he creates the serum, there should have been no further discussion about what else needed to happen. He just needed to go. She explains to him rather plainly, we don't have the time or the resources to make more of this. You have to go to the present. You have to make more of this, and you have to be prepared to distribute this stuff when these things land or attack or whenever, whatever it is they do. And he's like, I can't leave you behind. And this is the thing that I've complained about with like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and, and characters where the present setting you're in no longer matters. You're changing things to the point where the people that you have now grown close to and formed relationships are not going to exist once you make decision A. So just so people know what I'm talking about, like, and I've brought this up on a different podcast, but Mac is in the virtual reality thing where Hydra runs the world, and he doesn't. And when they tell him like, "Hey, this is all virtual reality. None of this is real. Your daughter's still dead." He's like, "Well, I'm staying anyway because at least then I can still have a daughter." And it's like, come on, man. Nobody would make that decision.
No, that's not true.
Some people would, and I have sort of walked that back, but it still frustrates not being able to see the bigger picture. Just in those circumstances, frustrates the hell out of me within a narrative. And so here he's like, I don't want to leave you behind. I'm going to take you with me. I don't want to, this and that and the other thing. And I'm like, dude, the solution to all the problems and this future even being created lies within your grasp to fix. Go and fix it already. And they're hemming and hawing and arguing about it. And then monsters attack, and it's, and then she dies, and it's like, oh, what a loss. Ugh. Maybe you think that's unfair, but that's where the movie loses me, And then there's a whole other third act to this thing.
Yeah.
Seems to go on forever. That's the next problem. That's the next problem I have. So he comes back. He's like, I have the thing to kill the aliens. And whoever the politician in charge is like, well, the world seems to be satisfied with just tearing itself apart. So we're not really interested in your cure for the problem. And I'm like, again, who would act this way?
Yeah, you mentioned him like not quite grasping the intricacies of time travel, and even to the extent that he does, still wanting to save his daughter in the future, and being a bit like, okay, we can manufacture more of this. If you guys can hold out, we can get it back to you, and then you guys can start fighting back here as well. Like, I can kind of follow that. I'm with you that it's a little bit stupid, but I can follow it.
Mm-hmm.
When he gets back and is like, hey, I got the MacGuffin. And the whole, and one, he doesn't tell anyone. Two,
right.
The couple of people he does tell don't care. Leading to three, your ragtag plucky band of adventurers sneaking their way into Russia. Just...
I know there's people I know personally, like among our friends, there are going to be people that listen to this and be like, but I was having a good time and enjoying it, and that's fine. But this is yet another movie that doesn't survive any kind of real scrutiny. It's like, if you're just there for the roller coaster ride, sure, I get it. There was enough jingling keys and pretty colors and smiling faces and shiny pearly teeth to keep you interested in this. I get it. I sympathize. But if you at any point pitch meeting this. By the way, there is a pitch meeting for this.
I know. I need to watch it. I haven't watched it
Yeah,
yet.
I am waiting for us to finish this review so I can go watch it. But if you, what's wrong, everything wrong with this movie, or pitch meeting it, or think about it in any way, shape, or form, the second half of the second act and the entire third act don't make a tremendous amount of logical sense. People are now operating in ways they wouldn't actually act, and they're doing so for the sake of creating action set pieces and tension. And I'm like, that's shit writing. It just
really is. This movie really did. Again, the third act goes on for a while. This movie is almost 3 hours long, if memory serves. It's north of 2. It's like 2.5, I think.
Yeah, oh my god, it's 2 hours and 20 minutes.
Yeah, so this is a long movie, and it doesn't need to be this long. This thing could have a better. Again, if you could have edited this thing down again in the writing, like because that's where this starts. If this had been properly written, this could have been a legitimately great action movie.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it kind of got rushed. And there's a few things here that are half-baked. There's a few things here that are tacked on.
Well, the first act takes forever to get through. You get everything you need from Chris Pratt in the next 10 minutes. So the 20 to 30 minutes that followed it, including the asinine scene of him getting the time travel device like put on his arm against his will, which I thought was just poorly handled, didn't need to be there.
I could kind of dig that. It's not my preferred method of handling that whole narrative. Look, the whole gimmick is we need to get Chris Pratt into this military unit, right? Like that's the thing. And given the casualty rate, he's not going to volunteer, so we need a draft. Okay.
That's part I'm fine with. It's the way if you're watching it on the screen, the scene where they're literally forcing the time, they're not telling him what he's doing, and then they just force the time travel device on his arm. I'm like,
I'm with you. It could have been done better. That absolutely could have been handled and executed in a better way. You know what I really wanted out of it? What this movie made me really want? I want another movie that's just like Chris Pratt and J.K. Simmons.
Okay. Yeah.
Because their on-screen chemistry is great.
Yeah. Well, J.K. Simmons is a fantastic actor. And Chris Pratt's no slouch, and they provided a great relationship on screen.
If you need reminding about the range of J.K. Simmons, watch this movie, because the man goes from hard ass telling his kid, you cut me out as much as I cut you out, so deal with it. Yeah. To smiling happy Santa Claus when his granddaughter shows up. And is it incredibly believable in both? Like those two opposing things, just drop of a hat, he switches.
Again, I don't want to go off on a tangent because we'll be here all night talking about this, and it doesn't need to be. But like, if you really want to see the best of J.K. Simmons' range, go watch Oz. Because
Oz is good.
Like his sinister behavior versus like his genuinely like I'm happy to be around my Nazi friends was fantastic. It's great range.
I love his character introduction in that. I think I talked about this when we discussed Oz on Everyone Loves a Bad Guy. He starts out and you almost think he's going to be a good guy. He's going to be the slightly older guy who's been here for a few more years, who's going to take Beecher, you show him the ropes.
Right.
And then then he switches, like snapping your fingers when they get in the cell together.
All right, put that on, sweetheart. Oh.
And he just goes, that's what you are, my livestock. And you suddenly realize, oh no.
Right.
We were so wrong.
Yeah. But that's the thing. Like I said, J.K. Simmons is one of the great actors of our time. And like I said, Chris Pratt's not bad.
Chris Pratt's a very good actor.
So if they hadn't pulled that scene off, I'd have been surprised.
I suppose it was just, even expecting how good, even knowing how good those two are, they exceeded my expectations. A few other positive things, because I do want to say, it's easy to see why people like this movie, and I don't mean that as a pejorative. The aliens are well designed. I do want to give them credit for that.
I don't know. They seem very derivative to me, but I guess how many different ways can you do bugs?
That's again, you do kind of have to have an eye for the detail of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, look, what you kind of get here, if I wanted to be, disingenuous, you, on the one hand, have the alien. You take parts of the aliens from Independence Day and parts of the bugs from Starship Troopers, and you throw them in a blender, and this is what comes out.
Yeah.
Conceptually, but again, they're certainly scary looking. You know, they get across the appropriate menace. They are their defenses are believable.
Yeah.
You know, having an exoskeletal structure that is strong enough to deflect most small arms fire, but being more sensitive, you know, in the throat and abdomen. Cool. I'm with you. I liked that they didn't have some stupid weakness. You know, it wasn't like, oh, they can't swim, so as long as we're on the base, we're safe.
What movie was that where we were like, oh, this is dumb? And it was literally like they couldn't get into water.
A little bit of Quiet Place Part 2 when it comes out that they can't swim.
That's right. That's why I heard you guys talking about it. Okay.
Again, just a little bit there. I think A Quiet Place Part 2 handled it a little bit better because, one, we've taken a very narrow approach to these movies. You know, we have very focused stories as opposed to a broader story. And so I'm willing to go along with that a little bit. And it's kind of like, again, I'm willing to go along with the thought process that we haven't seen everything that the universe of A Quiet Place has to offer.
Yeah.
Somewhat contrasted with, you know, these creatures where they're everywhere and they started in Russia and they can't swim. So why are they in Australia? You know, like that would be a problem.
Right.
So thankfully they avoided that. Some of the action set pieces are good. I actually like their kind of this first stuff we get in Miami is they're kind of stalking through the streets, have to go into the building, have to escape. The escape sequence itself, I took editing issues with. That is really chopped together poorly to try and convey the passage of time. You get one cut where they're on a street, and then we cut to the command post, and then back to them, and now they're nimbly jumping across shipping crates. Like, there's no sense of continuity or time in that, and it's a real problem.
Mm-hmm.
But everything before that is fine. I kind of dug the assault on the last base that they have, the oil, whatever the converted oil derrick is, or what have you.
When the alien dog bugs invade the raft.
Yeah, like I liked that. I thought it was.
Yeah.
I thought they believably set up their defenses. I thought they believably had enough time. You know, this wasn't they show up and we have nothing prepared, or what we have prepared does nothing. Like, no, they literally bought 20 minutes of time for him to jump back. Like, it worked as intended. So kudos.
Yes, it works. But again, I just watched Aliens, and so.
Oh, you can always find better versions.
Yeah, I just, here's the thing. So, like, I'm gonna do like a kind of like a three-way comparison here. So Thanos shows up to Wakanda and launches his dog things.
Okay. The Outriders.
The Outriders. And the scope, you know, you have the wide open landscape of Wakanda, and there's these dogs, you know, when the shields finally go down, running at the Avengers and the Avengers running at them. And it looks great. It's you know, the scale and scope of the Outriders running at the Avengers is horrifying. But it makes good use of that landscape, especially because of the way that it was shot. Well, it was wide, but it was still up close on these rabid dog things to where you truly get a sense of the horror that's about to befall Wakanda. Aliens, and it's funny because you were like, why don't you show them Alien? Look, man, they barely got through this. You know, these are long movies. They're not quite ready for the slow burn horror yet.
Well, hang on. To be fair, you also showed them the special, the director's cut of Aliens, which is...
It was a special edition, which is not the director's cut. The director's cut has a thing with her and with Ripley and her daughter. This one didn't. This one has some extended scenes.
The director's cut of Aliens is actually better, which is...
I had that argument with Sean years ago, but that's a podcast for a different day.
Yeah.
Anyway, I brought that up because like there were times where my kids were kind of like tuning out, and like my son was running back and forth because he, you know, this is a long movie to force a 7-year-old.
Look, I'm just my only argument with that was not so much, you know, a 7-year-old can sit through Alien. It's more that if you're concerned about content.
Oh no, but that's never been the issue. Was never the content. The issue with Terminator was content because boobies.
There's
Uh,
like one 20-second sequence.
all right, so the scene where they're in the compound, they've sealed everything off, and you know what I'm talking about,
Yeah.
and they're looking at their gauges, and
And
they're
they're inside the
everywhere.
room.
Right?
They're inside the room, and the room's
And
shut. Like what? And somebody pokes his head through the.
right,
Yeah.
and somebody looks their head up, and that shot, and
Oh,
the
yeah.
music, like that screech, and then there's the alien just crawling upside down into towards
Yeah.
the camera. Oh, it's one of the best shots I've ever seen. It's so good.
It's amazing. It's genuinely amazing.
So one is a very claustrophobic tight shot. One is a wide landscape. Both are equally effective. This is like right in the middle of those two, where it's not nearly as effective as either one. It's a wide shot of these dog bug octopus creatures running at this this building in the water, and you get a sense of scope, but because the shot, and this is I think a failure of cinematography, because the shot is so far pulled back, it's kind of like a more crisp version of Congo. Remember the end of Congo? I've complained about this endlessly, that Congo looks like a video game. So it's more crisp and clear than that, but still kind of the same thing where it's just white dots running at the screen.
Let me give you another example that I think was better done than this, but might still also kind of service the point.
Do you get though what I'm saying?
I do.
Okay.
Just for another point of example, in case someone hasn't seen either of those two movies, unbelievably unlikely, but on the off chance. There's a similar sequence that is, again, slightly better done in World War Z when Jerusalem is overrun.
Okay.
That, again, is really good about balancing the scale between wide shots of, oh boy, lots of these things, with things that we can actually care about and more fully process. I agree with you that this isn't the best iteration of that. I suppose I'm just willing to kind of go with it because nothing about this movie is the best iteration of anything it does.
Yeah, I want you to finish up your point, and I definitely want to dovetail into your grander point of the glut of streaming movies and how we keep coming back to the outside the wire issue, which is so many movies are getting made now that are made with theater budgets, but better suited for streaming because there's such middle of the road broad content, which this is.
My complaint about it in this case is actually different from my complaint that I have lens flare because the sun is setting. Move over there. I don't want J.J. Abrams to
damn it, you beat me to
us.
that joke.
Don't want to be sued for gimmick infringement. My complaint. Was there anything else I wanted to say here? No, look, pretty much everyone gives a good performance. The characters are all written. Very few of them are annoying, and none of them are fatally annoying. Individual mileage will vary. The creatures are well designed. They're appropriately scary. The time travel is at least internally consistent. It's overly long, especially in the third act. Which, my bigger point about this movie in particular, and this largely comes down to my gripe about some of the writing. Part of the problem with the glut of streaming content is not so much that this would have been better suited for a smaller budget or what. I actually think this movie made very good use of its budget. And parts of this were designed to be in 3D and on the big screen. That's also fairly clear. My problem is, I think everyone is in such a rush to create content that what we get is a lot of movies like this, not in the sense that it needed to be smaller, but more in the sense that it needed another 3 months in the writing process and the editing and the refining to really kind of hone it into the best version of itself. But because everything is so rushed in terms of trying to get things bought and get things out, it didn't get that time. And what we get is something that is, mostly enjoyable, if ultimately forgettable, when it's also very clear that the potential was there for this to be better. Again, some stuff is never going to be better. And, Outside the Wire was never going to really be better than what it was. Stuff could have been improved, but you were never going to get, a great movie out of it. This one, I think, you might have been able to squeeze a low key great action flick out of this premise and this cast in particular, but it just wasn't quite there. And in our rush to get everything out, it lost the opportunity to be so much better than it is. And that's a problem we're going to see with a lot of movies. I think everyone, you write something and you feel okay about it, but instead of having more of the refining process go through, Amazon or Netflix or whatever, insert whatever property you want to here, says, okay, this is good enough. Here's a bunch of money. Let's start, especially if you have someone attached to it. If your agent happens to share the script with a Chris Pratt, and Pratt goes, yeah, I'm very interested in shooting this, suddenly everything ramps. Like, we got to get this now because he might get something else or the schedule might shift. And
he's got to do Jurassic Park and Guardians of the Galaxy movies.
Yeah, and even if he didn't, even if you could maybe take that time to further refine things, and he'd still be interested however many months from now. Well, in that time, maybe Netflix decides to offer you more money, or the sundown period elapses on our interest in this. We bought the rights to this for X period of time. If we don't do something in X period, and those periods are getting shorter and shorter, because again, we don't want Netflix. If you're Amazon, you don't want Netflix or Paramount or whatever. Again, insert whatever group you have going on here. We're just going to get a lot of stuff that is 3/4. I won't call it half baked. We're going to get stuff that's 3/4 baked, and you're going to eat it, and you're going to go, it's not bad, but boy, if you'd been able to give this the other, the last finishing touches, this could have been so much better than it is. And I think that's ultimately where I've landed on this. You have a good cast, you have a decent premise, you have some good set pieces, you have well-designed aliens. It ultimately lacks. It's ultimately lacking the finishing touches and the final bits of refining that take things from acceptable but forgettable to genuinely great.
Yeah, I think the headline of what you're saying is there's a better movie here had only some more time and care and energy have been put into making one, but they sort of settled for, what's the joke I always make that I stole from Gung Ho? We'll settle for the mid-tier goal, because at this point, you're not, you put out this is at a $200 million budget. You put out a $200 million budget film. You're aiming for 5 to 750 at a minimum.
Yeah.
You're hoping for $1 billion, and then once it's going to end up going to streaming, you're like, okay. I mean, at this point, it's just content to retain people or push people into subscribing to your service. And your audience reach is probably much greater than if it had gone to the theater. But then scrutiny, I think, large scale scrutiny isn't going to happen. Again, if you're watching this on the large amount of people watching this on like a Netflix or an Amazon or Hulu or whatever are not, I don't think, are taking a lot of time examining the finer points of film craft. There, it was like, oh, this new Chris Pratt thing's on Amazon. I gotta order batteries. I gotta order groceries, and I want to watch a movie. All right, So
I mean, look, I have Amazon Prime. It's a wonderful service, and that's partially because we are slightly sponsored by Amazon. But I'm not saying that to.
Which does bring me to a point, and it's the last point I want to make, and then we should move on. The music in this, not that it sucked, but it was so stocky.
Yeah. Who did the music for this?
I
assume you have
know.
the wiki up, so it should be on the.
I do, but
it should be listed.
It's not.
It's not. It should be up near the top.
Okay. Yeah. Music by Lorne Balfe.
Okay, buddy. I don't know how much effort you put into this, but boy, was it not much.
Yeah, he's worked on things like 13 Hours, The Secret Soldiers of Benghazi, Terminator Genesis, Mission Impossible. I mean, it sounded, the thing that stood out about it to me was that it sounded like so many other movies, to the point where I thought they were using other movies' music.
I wonder how much of this
stock.
How much of this was sampled, right?
Yeah, right. Well, I'll tell you.
But if you want to listen and disagree with us,
you can go to amazonmusic.com /W2M, which is a link that I'll be providing in the description of this podcast. And you can get a free 30 days of amazonmusic.com. I wouldn't listen to this soundtrack. That's a giant waste of time. But there are better ones out there. Don't listen to this person.
We already referenced Aliens. Find that soundtrack. It's great.
Apparently, this person, Lauren Balfe, takes after Hans Zimmer. Just go listen to a Hans Zimmer soundtrack. It's fine. It's fine. To do that and get a free 30 days of Amazon Music, click the link. That's Amazon Music. Get AmazonMusic.com /W2M Network. That's get AmazonMusic.com /W2M Network to get your free 30 days. If you want to cancel after 30 days, you can. No fuss, no muss. If you want to keep it, and I would, why wouldn't you? Who doesn't love free, streaming music? You just pay the monthly fee like you do everything else. You would do the same for Spotify or Apple Music, but this is better, and you can link it to all of your other Amazon services. Everyone uses Amazon. I mean, come on. Like a $1 zillion company. They have so much money because everyone uses them. They can buy $200 million films and not even bat an eye.
We don't know has it been discussed what they paid for it?
About $200 million, which was about what the budget.
So they gave him about the break-even point.
Yep. And Paramount, washed their hands of it, and they're like, all right, we're done.
To be fair, if I'm an executive at Paramount, that's a good decision with this movie. Like, if you had released this, especially, look, Fast 9 had domestically, we talked about this. It had an 80% drop in its China budget and its China returns from first week to second. It had roughly that here in the United States. More on that tomorrow when we talk about The Purge, because we'll get more into the money at that point.
Yeah, but yeah, they'd have taken a bath on this.
Yeah, you're trying to come out against Fast 9. You're coming out against Black Widow. And you're doing so in a depressed theater market, recovering but still depressed.
Right. No, I thought it
was the right call.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. All right, so that's our review of the Tomorrow War. But stick around because we're going to talk about some news that hit today.
And now I'm up at News Flash.
So Richard Donner passed away. He was 91. He directed Superman, part of Superman 2, Lethal Weapon, and The Goonies. I have an article, among others. I had an article here from Deadline that I'm just going to read a little bit of. Richard Donner, the prolific Hollywood director and producer whose helming credits included some of the most iconic movies of the 70s and 80s, including the Christopher Reeve starring Superman, The Goonies, Mel Gibson, Danny Glover Buddy Cop, Lethal Weapon. Again, he was 91. Donner passed away Monday, according to his wife, the producer Lauren Schuler Donner, and his business manager. No cause of death has been revealed. The Bronx-born Donner, a genial man with a booming voice, started his career directing for television. His TV credits included a laundry list of staple shows from the 60s, including Route 66, The Rifleman, The Twilight Zone, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., Gilligan's Island, Perry Mason, and Wild Wild West. His debut feature, X-15 in 1961, with Charles Bronson and a young Mary Tyler Moore, was followed by the 1968 crime comedy Salt and Pepper, starring Sammy Davis Jr. and Peter Lawford, and 1969's Lola, with Charles Bronson and Susan George. I actually did not see that version of Lola. I believe I saw the Kubrick version. He segued to films full-time with the 1976 spookies The Omen. That led to 1978 Superman, the original superhero movie that starred Reeve as the Man of Steel alongside Margot Kidder, Marlon Brando, Gene Hackman, and Ned Beatty, the late Ned Beatty now. The Warner Brothers blockbuster with a budget of about $55 million grossed more than $300 million at the global box office, the first movie tentpole based on a superhero comic character. It scored 3 Oscar nominations and won a Special Academy Award for its visual effects. It also cast the die for superhero franchise space now dominated by Marvel Cinematic Universe and the DC Universe of films. And it goes on, talks a little bit about his history of what happened with Superman 2 and all of that. So I'm not going to spend too long about this, but did you ever see The Omen?
I have. I've seen Omen.
Yeah, what'd you think of it?
It's a bit of a classic in horror circles for a reason.
Mm-hmm. I don't know that much about it. Like I know it's referenced a bunch of times, but I've never seen it.
If you haven't seen it, it's quite good.
Mm-hmm.
It stars Gregory Peck in a rare kind of horror turn for a very, very serious actor. The basic premise is Gregory Peck's son is the Antichrist.
Okay.
And figuring out what to do about it.
What makes the direction on that thing stand out? Since we're talking about Richard Donner himself.
If you haven't, you can find just the opening sequence on YouTube, and I would encourage you to look it up if you haven't seen it, where the maid for, unless I'm confusing my horror movies, and I don't believe I am, the maid for Damien, the little boy who is the Antichrist, hangs herself.
Oh God!
Crying out, "It's all for you!" Like the presence of this child is so evil that it induces suicide and other various indiscretions. It's a very well directed shot. I mean, again, you can look it up and you can easily tell. Donner, I looked up his filmography just recently in light of his passing. This man was my childhood in so many ways.
Yeah.
Not so much the Goonies. I've never been a big Goonies guy, but he directed the Rutger Hauer, Matthew Broderick pick Lady Hawk, which I've seen many, many times.
Okay.
The aforementioned Lethal Weapon, the Bill Murray classic Scrooged, which is
that's great. And I know that's some people's favorite interpretation of A Christmas Carol.
It's one of my favorites. I don't know if it's the top of the list, but it's certainly ask me for top 3. It's in there, right up there with the Muppets. Like. It's like that, the Muppets, and then the George C. Scott version, I think, are probably my top 3 variations on A Christmas Carol. He did the 1995 Sylvester Stallone and Antonio Banderas film Assassins, which is a lot more fun than you'd think. Yeah.
Okay.
He did Conspiracy Theory, which is it's mostly interesting for Mel Gibson's performance, and of course watching him opposite Patrick Stewart is a joy. But Mel Gibson is also, people forget how great an actor he is because he's a little bit crazy.
I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, whatever anniversary of the original Superman movie was in theaters for a brief showing, and I took my daughter, and I, being born in 1976, I did not obviously see Superman in the theater, so that was the first time I'd gotten to do so. And I'll tell you, between my positive memories of Donner are definitely that first Superman movie, and seeing his direction on the big screen where it was meant to be. It's really phenomenal. There are some great shots
in the 70s. He made it look like Christopher Reeve was flying. Like it would be so easy to say, he's on wires.
Right.
And I mean, logically, that's how they did the stunt, but it's done with such care that you kind of forget. And that deserves a tremendous amount of credit.
Well, I was thinking, and I don't want to go into a long, detailed examination of the superhero genre. This isn't the time or the place for it. I also don't want to spend all night doing this. But I think about like modern superhero movies, and some of the editorial complaints about them from fans is it never feels like superheroes are saving people. They never have a superhero moment. They have a superhero landing.
Yeah, you have the 3-point landing.
But they never, there's never the Superman catching a helicopter as it plummets to its doom moment. And with the swelling music and all of that. Yeah.
You get very, I think the first Iron Man went out of its way to have one of those moments.
Sure, it was also 20 years ago.
Yeah, and the first Captain America as well, if memory serves. But that's a very fair criticism of the Marvel formula at the moment, is that their heroes aren't actually all that heroic.
Well, then there's DC, which is even worse. And I think a lot of this is leveled at them. But just kind of going back to Donner and really framing that, Donner taking care to frame Superman in a way that makes him look the most heroic they can. And here's the thing, we're talking the 70s here, so there's not a whole lot they can do, in terms of action set pieces with Superman. They make the most of it.
Yeah.
And it's like a song, the first Superman, in that a lot of, you're building, you have this like cascade, this sort of explosion of this very heroic moment with swelling music and all that is shot so beautifully. And then the action comes back down again. I mean, like a big set piece of Superman is him talking to Miss Tessmacher and Lex Luthor.
Yeah.
And he's like drowning in a pool. The other big set piece is the earthquake bit with Margot Kidder. But outside of that, because the earthquake bit and then spinning around the earth plus the helicopter bit are so well done, you don't find yourself missing a lot of action. It was funny because, like, I brought Lily had to have been 8 or 9 at the time that I guess I took her, and I remember asking, like, what did you think about that? And she was like, it was, you know, like, she too was like very stuck on. I love the part where he saves Lois Lane from the helicopter. You know, it's such a great scene.
Yeah,
you know,
I saw this on Twitter. I don't know if I retweeted it or not. Somebody retweeted, quote tweeted something from a couple of years ago that was just the shot of the newsroom. That like single tracking shot for about 2 minutes when Perry White comes out and talks with Jimmy, and then that dovetails into talking to Lois and she and Clark as they head out, and it's this glorious non-cut, well-shot sequence that's designed to convey the chaos, not just the chaos of the newsroom, but how Clark fits into everything as a person. And I hate to be that they don't make them like that anymore, Guy, but they really very rarely put together those kinds of shots anymore.
So I know you said you're not a fan of the Goonies, and this isn't so much a fan of the Goonies thing, but you can't argue that the great wonder of the direction on the Goonies, and I would say the cinematographer for that movie should get credit for this, is how much of that is shot in a dark cave.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like it's shot in a dark cave.
Almost none of there's very few sequences that feel like that. That's very true. Goonies. Look, I said I'm not a big fan of them, but you have to be a very special kind of person to actively dislike the movie.
Right.
It's well done. It's well made.
That was one that I definitely took my kids to during the pandemic, in the few theaters that were open, and there was like no new movie, so all they were showing was old movies, and that was one of them. And they really enjoyed it. But the thing about, there's a lot of whimsy in the Goonies. There's a lot of like kid empowerment. It's definitely a movie that makes you feel good about, and hopeful about being a child.
Yeah. Do the truffle shuffle.
Not gonna do it. Like Sean Astin was not the world's greatest actor back then, but I think got the most out of his performance. Like he's very earnest. And carries that thing, and that's credit to Donner for being able to work with a group of, kids.
You get that many kids, and none of them suck.
Right.
Like, sure, none of them are great. They're child actors. Great child actors are not even 1 in a million. They're rarer than that.
Yeah, sure.
But
they have to carry that film, and they do.
Yeah, like he got this ensemble together, and he structured his movie in such a way that none of the kids suck, none of them detract from everything, and they could have very easily. And then you have a few slightly more seasoned actors that are kind of carrying a bit more of the load.
So years ago, I had Chris Evans, formerly of the Casual Heroes. I don't think he does any podcasts anymore. I think he streams on Twitch his gaming, but him and Gavin don't podcast. I haven't done a podcast in over a year. But I had him on once upon a time to talk about the first 2 Lethal Weapon movies.
Oh, I love those movies.
Yeah, and we talked briefly about redoing that entire series because I never finished it. But I bring it up because it's another Richard Donner movie, and the thing that always stood out to me about Lethal Weapon kind of actually reminds me of the Tomorrow War in just the sense of, yes, you have this great big action thing around a solid heart. And in that sense, it's not, it's a lot of Lethal Weapon focuses on Mel Gibson's character's mental health issues.
Yeah.
His struggle with suicidal ideations and all of that.
Serious question. Have you seen the director's cut of the first Lethal Weapon?
I don't believe I have.
It's a little bit longer. It adds a couple of genuinely great scenes. One that is, there's a sniper at a school. And a very clearly deranged person. It's not a cold sniper. It's a guy with like a machine gun, and he's kind of barricaded, and everyone knows he's there. And Mel Gibson's Martin Riggs just straight up walks up the steps into the courtyard by the school, in front of the school, and says, "Come on, do it." The guy shoots at him. He doesn't move. He misses, and his response is at that point, "Well, I'm still here, asshole. Or do you only do kids?" When the guy pokes his head back out, he shoots him dead.
Nice.
But you want to know, again, where his headspace is. Yeah, sure. You're either going to shoot me or I'm going to shoot you, and I'm fine with either outcome. There's another scene with Danny Glover, actually, where, he's struggling with his age a little bit.
Right.
And it's just him going to the shooting range to see if he's still got it. And he does. And it's just, and he, when he looks at his shooting target when it's all said and done, and just has this really kind of nice, contented smile, like, yeah, there's still gas in the tank, right? just little stuff like that.
The man lived to 91. He had a very successful career. I don't know of any, like, we kind of lamented some elements of Martin Scorsese's career when we talked about The Irishman. We've certainly talked about all the sex pervert directors that are out there. I've never heard a bad story about Richard Donner. Like, the worst thing was he didn't get along. He had issues with the studio, which, he got unceremoniously ousted from Superman 2, which I have seen that director's cut. The director's cut of Superman 2 is fantastic.
Yeah.
And I think it's superior to what we ended up with Superman 2. Nothing's as good as Superman 3, though. Anyway.
No, Mark, the correct answer is nothing as good as Superman 4. Look, you and I argued on Superman 3, I seem to recall, that what we needed was actually just an odd buddy duo of Lex Luthor wannabe and Richard Pryor trying to undo what they did to Superman as Superman goes full jackass mode. I
honestly just wanted to spin off with Richard Pryor's character. I told you
the idiot computer savant Richard Pryor.
I tell you, my favorite scenes in movie history is him getting Brad, the security guard, drunk.
Oh, that's great.
You never get drunk, do you?
Then when he finds out that the security system actually requires to
both hands at the same time. You think you got me, don't you? The Philly Flash.
Get ready for the Philly Flash.
So
he
good.
Brings the other unconscious body any kind of time. 1, 2, 3.
But yeah,
his drunk hacking. He screws up. He screws up a traffic light.
I have never heard a bad story about Richard Donner. He seemed to have lived a wonderful life, and we should all be as blessed as he was. I'll give you the last word on Richard Donner, and we'll move on.
Yeah, he was great about creating static shots. Not static, but still shots without a lot of cuts. He was great about finding emotional cores of stories. More than just about anything. That I think is a very much lost art at the moment in a lot of especially bigger budget movies. People understand there should be an emotional core, but it never quite marries.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, talking about Lethal Weapon, the emotional story about a man so depressed and despondent with life that he just wants to die, finding the will to continue living with this new partner and his new partner's family, and his partner kind of also being wrapped up in the am I getting too old to keep doing my job? That is your emotional core, and those two and the dynamic between them is beautiful and is just augmented by tremendous action and some great gunplay and a final fight sequence that was actually choreographed by the Gracie family.
Oh cool.
That's why in 1997 that movie ends with a triangle choke.
All right, here we go with our critical review.
Are you ready? No! I said, are you ready?
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
All right, as you can see, this has a 53% tomato meter. A lot of complaining about this movie, and we certainly had our issues with it, but I thought this was going to be much worse based on like the buzz I was getting.
I actually, again, if I were to give this a grade, it would be a passing grade, but barely.
Mm-hmm. So the critical consensus: Chris Pratt ably anchors the sci-fi adventure, even if the Tomorrow War may not linger in the memory much longer than today. And the audience says, it isn't the most surprising time travel movie, but a satisfying story and plenty of entertaining action to make the Tomorrow War worth a watch. Okay, then.
Hey, look, they both kind of arrived at the points we made. We get them right every now and then.
I know I say this every show, and I know I say this every show, and I know I say this every show. And it really should get us onto Rotten Tomatoes. All righty. I'm going to read a mix of these because I think this is a solid middle of the road here. So I think both this, I think the Splats and the Freshes both have it wrong. Drew Deitch of Giant Frickin' Robot. The Tomorrow War has a big lazy Sunday movie on TNT energy, and that is not a compliment.
Look, buddy, I just said this movie could have been better, but not everything's gonna be great. Sometimes that's all you need out of a film. I mean, for crying out loud, we just had the 4th of July. Independence Day is a staple around my house for that same, and that's all that is.
Michael Ward of Should I See It? Millions had to die so one family could hug it out. Cool.
You, sir, are an idiot.
I was like, wow, why do you review movies? You sound like you hate your job.
Hold on. I try not to throw. I shouldn't say that because I throw shade at people's intelligence.
I was
on this show all the time. Hang on.
What?
I don't know how on God's green earth that was your takeaway from this movie. That takes a special level of stupid.
Kiko Martinez of San Antonio Current, 0 points for originality. It's 2021. Go fuck yourself.
Hold on, Kiko. Look, I want to on occasion lament the death of creativity and originality in Hollywood. I really am. Because I believe that there's still plenty of room for it. But if you look at the top grossing box office for the year, everything, and I mean everything, is a spin-off, a sequel, or a slight reboot. And you really want to try and pretend you don't understand why originality is dying in Hollywood? Shame on you, you moron.
Neil Ma of news.com.au, top critic, Red Star, as you can plainly see. The Tomorrow War is a movie that needed a surround sound, enormous screen experience because its only value is in its spectacle. Come on, man.
That's not. No. Look, the majority of its value is its spectacle, I think. That's probably
fair.
There
was a whole thing
Hang
we
on.
talked about the emotional core
Would
of this
you let
movie.
me finish my point? I said most of its value was its spectacle, but that's not its only value. If that scene with Chris Pratt and his daughter in the future on the beach, as she explains to him the quiet desperation of his life and how it destroyed him and catastrophically damaged her, doesn't tweak your heart just a little bit, you're more dead inside than I am, and my doctor tells me that's a serious problem I have.
Luke Y, and I wasn't come on manning at you. I was come on manning at the reviewer. Luke Y. Thompson of Superhero Hype. It had it open in theaters as planned, a $20 ticket might feel like a ripoff. At home, it's a star-fueled spectacle that's moderately better than most direct-to-streaming films that try to do the same thing. Okay.
I mean, that's largely fair, I think.
Anthony Morris, it's better in the dark. I mean, that depends on who you're doing it in the dark with, I suppose. Dumb films that are secretly smart are awesome. This is a smart film that's secretly dumb, and no matter how solid the action is, that's not much fun at all.
I'm not entirely sure I even agree with the premise of your sentiment there.
I'm not even entirely sure that sentence made any logical sense. It just seems like words strung together.
No, it does. He's being needlessly pedantic about trying to justify his own taste in movies that are not of high caliber.
Kevin Carr, our new favorite reviewer of Fat Guy at the Movies. There are some fun scenes in it, but it's infuriating to watch if you have any sort of background in science fiction. By science fiction, do you mean Back to the Future? What the fuck are you talking about?
Okay, I actually kind of see the point there. And hang on, just follow me on this for a second. With science fiction, if that is your goal, is to write a science fiction story first and foremost, the fictional science has to play an integral role in what happens. This is in no small part why Star Wars is not science fiction. Because while there is fictional science of a sort, it's not about that. It's about space wizards. This movie, if you wanted to approach it as a science fiction movie first, that is a bit of a letdown because it leaves so much of the fictional science on the table, barely or unexplained, and that's a bit of a letdown. The reality is this is not a science fiction story first and foremost. It's an action movie with some sci-fi trappings, and that has to be judged on a different scale.
Yeah. And Aniruddha Chakrabarti, film companion. There is no saving the movie that tries to be every topping pizza of sci-fi in 139 minutes.
You, sir, have no understanding of science fiction. I just barely went on about what that is as a storytelling device, not whatever your medium happens to be. And your response is, hey, this has a bunch of sci-fi stuff crammed into it. Shut up. No.
Daniel Salzman of Salzy at the Movies. The Tomorrow War is just the type of escapist entertainment we need. Don't you tell me what I need, sir.
Yeah, really. Who made you the supreme arbiter of necessity?
Yeah. Try to get all up on my
Jerk.
grill about what I need and what I don't need. You don't know what I need. Nobody does.
Sure, that's a comforting notion to your wife.
She's well aware. Hey, your dad says, Roger Moore of Movie Nation, it's never that great, but rarely that bad either, until that god-awful finale. You know what I kept thinking about during that entire finale? And I kind of wanted to, I kind of wanted to see a little more of what I was thinking about than what we got, but you know, it doesn't necessarily make me not like the finale. The end of Alien versus Predator, where the alien queen is running at them.
Oh, yeah.
And because I'll never forget my buddy Chuck just blurting out, "Look, it's a mad T-Rox running on the scene," and it cracked me up every single time, especially the way he delivered that line. So I'm watching them fight the queen in the snow, and all I could think about is the queen from Alien versus Predator running through the snow like the T-Rex from Jurassic Park.
Well, that would have worked out just fine because it's still Chris Pratt.
Yeah, see, that's what we needed. He needed to fight the he needed Blue to come and save him.
What he needed to do was tame a few of the males. Because he was in the Navy, not the Navajo. The point there that guy's getting at, I think the finale is a bit rough. It takes us a while to get there. We both talked about the third act being overly long. And I would actually agree that parts of that final fight are a little bit wonky. I mean, we mentioned the editing process not being applied to this strictly. There's a bit early on when they arrive in the future that says where they are told these things can smell blood from up to a mile away. This is never paid off or referenced again until the very end when J.K. Simmons tries to lure the now blind queen over a cliff by cutting his hand, which is profoundly stupid because you're in close enough proximity. All you have to do is make noise.
I'm going to read this last one. This is going to be our end of the road here, and I'm actually going to, because reading this, I can't be looking at the camera, but I want to see your face.
Okay.
I'm going to read it like quick. Go back to the camera because I got to see your facial reaction to this.
All right.
Annie Bundle of NBC News think the film itself is a tired derivative. Pro-military and guns, pro-military and guns, pro-military and guns. Wannabe sci-fi film that will remind audiences of better older sci-fi action films also on streaming. There it is. That's what I was looking for.
Okay.
I can actually see your forehead pulsating.
That was almost as painful as my dental work.
Tell me more.
One, you can't assume that a pro-military and pro-gun movie is bad simply because it's pro-military and pro-gun. That's unfairly imposing your own bias onto the movie and is shameful, but I shouldn't expect anything else from someone who contributes to NBC, I suppose.
NBC News think.
Whatever.
Whatever that is.
Second, I'm going to go out on a limb and just kind of assume that you think the height of sci-fi military action is Starship Troopers, which you constantly reference as the height of satire, in no small part because you're a moron. Don't get me wrong, Starship Troopers is in fact a satire. I get that. But really, no, if your response to any movie even loosely in this particular genre is it's bad because guns are bad, I'd love to know you didn't seem to take a stance on the biological warfare. That was the actual point.
Again, not to continually reference Aliens to do this thing, an infinitely better movie, but what were they supposed to use? Harsh language?
Yeah. Like, really, we're not talking about a human conflict that is based in a bit of reality and can be resolved theoretically through diplomacy.
Right.
Never mind that war is actually the more natural state of nations than is peace, as has been historically proven. Well, proven. History suggests this, certainly. we're dealing with an unthinking alien invasive species that views us as nothing but food, and your response would be,
Mr. President, an alien animals are attacking us. They cannot be reasoned with. Call in the social workers. They'll do evaluations and assessments, and the aliens will go away.
Is it wrong that I think our current president would do that? Call in them.
What is the? You're talking about like the thing that the community organizer. Is that what you were going for?
No, unthinking. Like Biden being a little bit silly with his language.
Gotcha.
Mr. President, the aliens have arrived. Call in. Those people. Somebody. Call somebody.
we these are unthinking, unfeeling aliens that view us as food. Yes, but we must reach their hearts and minds. And on that note, that is our review.
Our handful of shots at the current administration. Look, if your panties are in a twist over that, we took plenty of shots at the previous administration too.
So just as a really, really quick aside, so I'm slowly but surely going through the entire Blog Talk Radio archive of every podcast I've ever done since 2006 and just putting it on my YouTube page. I'm not doing anything else with it. It's kind of to have a live available online archive of my entire history of podcasting. I don't care if anyone listens to it or not, but I'm going back and listening to them because some of the stuff is unlabeled and I don't know what I talked about. And I want to throw some labels on there and make pictures. So I went back and listened to not the very first show, the first show I did solo, and it was a post-election 2006 election wrap up. The next show I did, I much like my current podcast, I'm like, I can't do this alone. And John Brodigan came on and we did the show together for a really long time. And he cut out a little early. And so I was left to my own devices. And I'm like, oh, I get to talk about what I want to talk about now. And at the time, I was reporting a lot on my blog, my actual progressive conservatism blog, about what was going on in the Middle East, specifically Iran. Well, you think I'm a liberal panty waist now. You should have heard me at the end of this show going, we're at war with Iran. No, but nobody knows it. Nobody will listen to the people that do know. I'm a bit hawkish on that show.
To be fair, you weren't really wrong. We still haven't figured that out. And not to get too political, but now we're trying to reinstate terrible payment plans to that terrorist regime. Oh, terrorist regime would be a bit
I saw
violent dictatorship.
I saw more of a violent conflict with Iran coming out of 2006 than what actually happened. But
yeah,
I just you hear me and I sound like Michael Savage at times. But I'm like listening to myself going, "Oh God, this hasn't aged well." So if you want to hear my
very little from 2006 did.
So if you want to hear my early embarrassing ramblings about politics before I gave up entirely, started talking about this shit. That'll be slowly but surely uploaded to my YouTube page. And in the meantime,
we should totally bring back a politics podcast, just you and me.
It's a lot of preparation I don't feel like doing.
Would go so badly.
Tomorrow, Harry Broadhurst and I are threatening to review GCW Backyard Wrestling 3.
Oh God, why?
My kids and I, because I had fun watching it. My kids and I may or may not do an alternative commentary for Boss Baby 2. They were kind of excited about it. I think my son might still be, but my daughter, I don't know, she's sort of on the fence. But we will definitely, myself, Robert Winfrey, and Jason Teasley, will be reviewing The Forever Purge Wednesday.
In a terrible Southern accent, because if we move out of the cities, everyone speaks like they're from Texas, right? If you get out of New York or Los Angeles, it's all just bunch of y'alls and how do you do? God,
this here's the Forever Purge.
The real purge. The Forever Purge.
Wednesday, myself and Jesse
you writers of that stuff disgust me, for the record.
And Robert Cooper threatening to come back on the Metal Hammer of Doom for Buckcherry Hellbound. And then Thursday, myself and Sean Comer will be doing a Long Road to Ruin for the first 4 Purge movies. And then Black Widow comes out Friday. So we're re-airing our review of Civil War, where you get to hear me and Robert scream about the end of that movie. And from a distance, Andrew Graham screaming back at us, "You two idiots are wrong. Wrong, I tell you." Speaking of idiots, myself and Chris Bailey will be reviewing NXT Great American Bash and AEW Dynamite Road Rager, allegedly. Saturday, Jesse's got a syndicated source material, Supreme Madness. And then Sunday, we've got 2 shows airing. Robert's Everyone Loves a Bad Guy, Captain America Villains. And then myself and Evan Bevins will be reviewing the Mighty Ducks Game Changers. And then next week is all the Black Widow stuff and whatnot. Last week, we did the Fast Saga. We did F9, Black Country Communion re-air, Testament re-air. We did an on trial for Spun, which was a very fun conversation. We did my kids and I did a commentary for the first Boss Baby. I re-aired our reviews of Monsters U and the Lone Ranger that Jeff Harris and I did back in 2013. We did a re-airing of our Darkman Long Road to Ruin. And then on July 4th, I was telling my wife about this today. I re-listened to I re-aired the review of Independence Day 4 Resurgence, and I listened back to it, and it still cracked me up that line that it's so funny when you make yourself laugh listening to yourself. And I heard myself say, I think my dad thinks I'm an idiot. And I'm like trying to get ready in the morning so I'm listening. So it's like 6 o'clock in the morning when I listen to it. And I start laughing hysterically. And then the inaugural, the very, very first triple feature, myself and Sean Comer, we reviewed Werewolves Within, Hitman, and Tekken. So that's a thing we'll be doing. We're trying to do kind of a survey podcast of, multiple movies, something I actively avoided for a very long time, but I'm now realizing it's kind of a necessity. So, the big movies, either old or new, will still get the on trial, Long Road to Ruin, or Damn You Hollywood treatment. But some of these lesser movies that don't need a full hour deep dive discussion, like Werewolves Within, will be relegated to triple feature. And we'll be doing more of those, especially for a lot of the streaming titles. Netflix's Good on Paper and America the Motion Picture and stuff like that will be relegated to triple feature. And I'll be doing those with a whole host. In fact, later on this year, when Cry Macho comes out, you and I will do a triple feature of Westerns, modern Westerns.
Sort of, yeah. We're going to be doing that. What was it? Ghetto Cowboy? Concrete Cowboy?
Concrete Cowboy.
The book is based on, it's called Ghetto Cowboy, I think is where I got confused there. And then the movie from a few years ago, the Chris Pine vehicle, Hell or High Water.
Yeah. What do you got going on?
Well,
you got a big one this Saturday, right? No, that's not Saturday.
No, this Saturday.
This Saturday?
Yep, the 10th. Just before we recorded, I wrapped up my latest review of AEW Dark Elevation. So if you're interested in that, you can find it in the Wrestling Zone of 411mania.com. I do that every Monday. Wednesdays, I cover whatever MLW is doing. At the moment, they're re-airing old stuff, some of which is surprisingly interesting. This last week, we had a match between Bryan Danielson and Teddy Hart from 2004.
Oh, I bet that was bananas.
Not as much as you'd think. I was a little disappointed. So that Fridays, I cover WWE SmackDown because no one else would, which is pretty much exactly how that went down, actually. Saturday will be UFC 264, the trilogy fight between Dustin Poirier and Conor McGregor. I will be covering that in the MMA Zone of 411 Mania, so please do stop by, say hello. I always appreciate it. And I host Sundays. I host the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast. This last week is a preview of UFC 264, so if you want my thoughts on the fights, check it out. Also, my thoughts on the UFC throwing an interim title at Derek Lewis and Cyril Gahn because their belts are meaningless. And a little bit of a review of an interview Khabib did because, sure, why not? Needed to fill a little airtime.
All right.
So, yeah, that's it. And then the stuff coming up this next week. Mark mentioned the re-air of Everyone Loves a Bad Guy, Captain America. I would encourage you not to listen to this episode.
Who'd you have on for that?
No one.
Oh, that's okay.
And, me talking about comic book characters by myself is not the most. Some stuff I'm happy to extemporaneously speak on solo. Comic book characters aren't really one of those things.
Do you remember why you couldn't get a guest on for that? Like Pat or somebody?
No. I don't remember what shook out with that, but
gotcha.
Anyway, so you can listen to it if you're so inclined. It's a show. Some of those episodes I'm quite proud of. Some of them not so much. This would be a not so much one. What are you gonna do?
Hey,
Then
content is content.
Allegedly, I'm not entirely sure how true that sentiment is. And then we'll be reviewing Black Widow. I can't wait to dump all over that while Mark goes, "Shut up and have fun."
You know, I feel like that's going to be a lot of people. You know, you, me, Alexis, my friend Elizabeth might be on that show, and she's never done a podcast before. So, yeah, I don't know how it's going to go. I feel like this is going to be like Avengers or Star Wars, where it's like you have 30 seconds to talk, go, okay, moving on. You know, so
I will try my best to make sure my thoughts are concise and clear at a bare minimum.
And that's all we ask of you. That's all I ask of you. When I start singing,
please do not sing Phantom of the Opera to me, Mark.
And on that note, for Robert Winfrey, I'm Mark Radlitz. Thanks for listening. Be well, be safe, and behave.